Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good night, everybody. Hi, my name is Silvio Morelli, and I will host this session about cryptocurrency, especially about using Bitcoin as an example for this session. And I'm looking forward to an interactive session with you. About myself, I'm Silvio Morelli. I'm Italian, but I live in Switzerland, in Zurich. I'm 36 years old, and I've been working more than 20 years in various banks in Switzerland and also in New York. And exactly the time in New York in 2017, it was the time when I first got in touch with Bitcoin. So from then, I was very interested in cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, and this is the time when I started to educate myself about Bitcoin. And I try today, together with you both, with you all, to understand a little bit more about Bitcoin. But first of all, I would like to ask the audience, where are you from? From which country are you? Oh, nice. From Reese, I see the chat coming. Can you comment?
Yes, definitely, Silvio. So we have some people from the Philippines as well as Poland.
Wow, interesting.
Portugal as well. Wow. So lots of P's.
From around the world, it's global, and actually also Bitcoin is a global topic. But now we start with the session. So, all right, this is the agenda for today. So first, we will talk about the history of Bitcoin and what Bitcoin is. Then we go to public and private keys. These are the access to your Bitcoin in the Bitcoin network. Then how to protect your Bitcoin. This is one of the most important part of this session. And after that, we will see one example of a Bitcoin transaction, how the price of one Bitcoin is defined. Then we go to a little bit of detail about mining and halving, but not too much because we could talk hours about this topic. And last but not least, it's about the difference between Bitcoin, gold, and US dollars. So I start with this main question. Will Bitcoin be the global digital currency of the future? Some people argue, yes, this is the next money of the century. And some people say, no, it has no future. And this is something that we are gonna find out together. So first of all, the history of Bitcoin. So when first Bitcoin was mentioned in the internet, it was published about the white paper of Bitcoin. It was published by a person called Satoshi Nakamoto in October 2008. Actually, who is Satoshi Nakamoto? We don't know who is Satoshi Nakamoto. No one knows who is Satoshi Nakamoto. Some people say it is an institution. Some people say there's a government. Some people say just one person or a group of persons. We don't know who is Satoshi Nakamoto. But we know what is the white paper. The white paper is like a book that defines the rules and law within the Bitcoin and that explains why Bitcoin should be here. So this was published, and after that, in 2009, the first block was minted. So what does it mean? So it means that, and we will see in the session, Bitcoin, it's a blockchain technology. And the first block, it's called the Genesis block. And this one was mined in January 2003. 2009, the 3rd January, yes. So, and after that, this person, we know it, it's Hal Finney, he joined the network and started to mine as a second person in this protocol. Some time went by, and the first Bitcoin was exchanged for money. So for $1, it was equal to 1,000 Bitcoin. It was in the early beginning of 2009. After that, we see that a person in 2010 in May bought something real in his life, and he bought 2 pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoin. It was in 2010. The Bitcoin price was so low, and his intention was to see whether Bitcoin could be used as a payment for some goods, for 2 pizzas in this case. Exactly. And after that, also in the same year, in December 2010, this was the last time that we heard about Satoshi Nakamoto. This was the last time that we saw something from him. All right, this is the history of Bitcoin. Now let's see, there are sometimes confusion about Bitcoin, what does it mean, and blockchain and everything. We have defined it this way. Bitcoin with the capital letter defines the protocol for a decentralized peer-to-peer network. So peer-to-peer means it's me with another person, another institution that creates consensus without needing a central authority to provide trust. So the network itself defines the rules. There is not like, for example, in some countries, you have the government, you have the president, and the president says, this needs to be done and not. Here in the Bitcoin network, there is no president. All are equal. And because of that, with the there is no need of central authority to provide trust. So we trust all each other. As long as the network trusts itself, it's a trust network and it works. So this is for the capital letter B. For the smaller one, Bitcoin, and in bracelets, you see in capital BTC, this is the short name of the Bitcoin token. So this is, let's say, the currency that goes through this Bitcoin protocol, which needs to be mined by miners. We will go about miners, we'll talk later on. And last but not least, it's the blockchain, the terminology blockchain. This means just it's a public ledger. So it's an open architect. So you can imagine like an internet, but not for the internet like homepage, but it records transaction and everyone can have access to this blockchain. Now let's figure out some characteristics about Bitcoin, about the network in general. So as I mentioned, this is a decentralized global organized network. So the people, they come from all over the world and they are all connected to this network. One other characteristic is that all transactions are public. So whenever you do a transaction, you send some Bitcoin through the Bitcoin network, you can see it in the internet. There are some home pages where you can see where did the Bitcoin come from, to whom was it sent, and you see all the history of this Bitcoin, how it was used. The third point, very important, is the peer-to-peer interactions without the need of intermediaries. So what are intermediaries? For example, a bank. If you want to send some money to somebody abroad, let's say you send money from Switzerland to the US, I need to have a bank and the other person needs to have a bank as well. I could send theoretically the notes by sending it over by mail, but it will take too long. And for this, you need intermediaries, you need banks to facilitate in order that you can send the money. And here you don't need it because it's the network that supports your transactions. But how are the transactions? How do they go through the network? For this, you need miners. And miners are like in the mining of gold mining, they validate transactions, and as a reward, they receive new Bitcoin. We will talk about this later in the session. Then the fifth point, it's pseudo-anonymity. So what does it mean? It is, for a certain point, it is anonymous, that it is not linked to your ID, so to your identification. So the address, it's very long, but it has not a name, so it is not linked to your name. So if I know the public address, I don't know who is behind. But if I know that you own the public address, then I can link it. But most of the time, it's not possible. Then another characteristic important about the Bitcoin technology is that they use an asymmetric encryption method. You can Google it afterwards, and I will have also in the session some link that you can look up these points for yourself to understand it. It's quite complicated, but just that you have heard this word about asymmetric encryption in Bitcoin. Another point, very important, is that anywhere can freely use it without risk of seizure. So what does it mean? You don't need permission to join the Bitcoin network. Anywhere around the world, anyone can buy Bitcoin if there are some machines or applications and so on. And nobody can get the Bitcoin out of your wallet. We will see later on why it is like this. And one other point, the monetary policy of Bitcoin, it's defined and very clear. We know that until Bitcoin exists, it will be a maximum of 21 billion Bitcoin in the network. So these are just some characteristics about Bitcoin. So as said before, that you need to have some kind of access, some kind of account. And I want to explain you how Bitcoin works with this box, with this deposit box. So on the top, you see Bitcoin. So it's a public deposit box. You can put anything inside it, what fits in it. So you can put paper, money, whatsoever. This is just a fiction for you to understand how the Bitcoin network works. Obviously, in the Bitcoin network, you would receive Bitcoin only. Another important here in this regard is that you know where your deposit box is, and you know it with a Bitcoin address, and it's called a public address. So this address is for everybody can see it. Everybody knows this is there, but nobody has access as long as, and this is the third important thing, is as long as you have your private key with you. What does it mean? This is a code. Imagine a private key is like a very, 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 very long code. We will see it in the next slide. And if you know this one, then I can open it. So this is why it's very important to keep this secure and safe from everyone. But we will talk about it in a minute. So this is just to show you how Bitcoin could look like in the real life using the example of a deposit box. So, and this is the real one. So on the left side, you see the private key. So it is very, very large number. And the private key, it's linked to your public key. So your private key, it's private. So just you need to know it. And the other one is public. Anyone can know it. For example, if you want to receive or send Bitcoin, your public key is public on the internet. On the other hand, the private key, it's like the key to your, your private key is the access to your public key. And from the public key, you cannot know what is the private key. So this is why private key, it's very important that you keep it for yourself. First of all, never share it with anybody and never store it on the computer and smartphone. And why do I say this? Because you never know if you get hacked, you have your private key somewhere. If somebody knows your private key, they can take all your Bitcoin from your account and they can send it away, and you will never more be able to receive it. So this is why it is important to have the private key on a different, not on your computer or smartphone. Exactly. Some people within the Bitcoin network, very, very smart, intelligent people who have helped to build up the Bitcoin network, have also implemented some improvement, because you see the private key, to memorize it in my head, it's very long, it's difficult. So some very intelligent people within the Bitcoin network, they have invented a new possibility to save your private key. And we see it now here in this page. So this is called the seed phrase. So this is, if you see on the right side on the bottom, it's called the Bitcoin Improvement Proposal 39. So what is the aim of this proposal? The aim is that you are able to access your or to recover your private keys with the help of a seed phrase. So, and the seed phrase, it's a list of 12, 24 or 48 words, which are randomly used from a database. And if I'm not wrong, there are like 2,200 other words that have been defined from the network in order to ensure that your private keys can be recovered just from you. So anyone knowing the seed phrase, your seed phrase of your account, can actually unlock your account and they can send away all the Bitcoin that you have. And once it's sent, it's lost forever. So this is very important, the seed phrase. It is within all apps, you have the seed phrase. And the interesting thing about this seed phrase is that if you lose your mobile phone or if you lose your computer whatsoever, or you are somewhere in another country and you want to have access to your Bitcoin, it's very easy that you can just download any application and your seed phrase will work on every application because it is not saved within the application, but is it saved just within your with some technique on your computer, but in a secure way that nobody can have access. So also for this seed phrase, never share it with anybody, never store it on your computer or smartphone. If you write it down on a paper and put it somewhere that nobody knows where it is, this is very important. Some people are using also plates from stainless to engrave the seed phrase in it, because when there is fire, the paper can burn and the plate not. So these are the things that you can do in order to protect your Bitcoin from that somebody can steal it. So, and this is how it looks when you want to recover your phrase. So then this is an example of one application, and you see the 12 words, and then you need to verify them in the right order. And if you don't do it in the right order, if you make a mistake, you write first the one word and then the other, you will not have access to your Bitcoin anymore. So now we have seen that we have discussed about Bitcoin. So, but what can Bitcoin be used for? If anybody in the audience, do you know any example of usage of Bitcoin? What can Bitcoin be used for? Do you have any example, any experience that you would like to share within the group? Would be very interesting also to see if you could guess what it can be used. But I have prepared an example for you. So this is the example of a Bitcoin transaction. So we have here Alice and we have here Bob. So and Alice, she wants to buy a product from Bob. Let's say Bob has a bookstore and he sells books over his homepage. So and then Bob says, I want that you pay me in Bitcoin. So then Alice, she receives the public key of Bob, can scan it, and can request that the transaction can be done. In order to pay with Bitcoin, you need to have, you can do it with your computer to buy Bitcoin, or you can do it with your application on your smartphone that you can buy by using your bank or your credit card, or even on there are special Bitcoin machines where you can buy Bitcoin. So this is the first thing that she needs to do before she can send Bitcoin to Bob. But once the request has been sent, it will be bundled in a block. So you send the transaction, want to send Bitcoin, it goes first into a block. It doesn't go directly, because here you need the miner, because the miner, what they do, they are connected to the network, right? And they have very strong machines, like farming, a lot of encryption machines that are all connected together. And what they do, they try to solve a mathematical problem with an algorithm behind. It is very, very technical, and also for me, as not in the IT itself, it's too complicated. But once you are within the network and you have this mining power that you need, these processes that you need to first of all validate transaction within the block, and in order to receive Bitcoin as a reward, you need to do some mathematical, you need to solve some mathematical problems, very long problems that you need a lot of energy, a lot of power, and a lot of miners are competing for one block, because you get 6.25 Bitcoin, but not everybody will be able to get the block. So one miner is every time responsible for the block. And it can be a mining pool, it can be a pool of like different people all together in a mining pool, and they are bringing all the power within the network, or it can be just one big institution that has a lot of computers doing solving these problems, so that you get your reward as well. So once we are here now, so once the miner has validated the new block, the transaction is within the system. And then it is very important, because then you have the confirmation, okay, all transactions within the block have been validated, and all the network accepts it, that everything is fine. Then it goes to the next block, and everything starts from the beginning. The miners are putting computational power to solve this mathematical problem. And then the next block is created. So every 10 minutes, a block is created. And if you know it is in the third block, you can be ensured that the probability that the blocks need to be changed again, it's very, very low. It is almost impossible, because it would mean that one miner who wants, for example, attack the whole Bitcoin network would need much, much more power than all other in the network itself, because he would need to change, or this mining company whatsoever would need to change every transaction within the Bitcoin starting from 2009, and this is impossible. Also, I've asked also people from the cybersecurity space who are more experienced in that, and they said it is impossible to hack the Bitcoin network or to change the transaction. So yes, so basically we saw that Bob has received the Bitcoin from Alice, and now Bob says, okay, I want to change it to my currency. Bob uses US dollars. What he needs to do is to change it, but you need to know also the price. So, and the the question now would be, what is the current price of a Bitcoin? Does anybody know what is the current price of Bitcoin? No. Okay, so I hope you see it. And this is the current Bitcoin price in US dollars. So it's almost 23,000 US dollars. And this this means for one Bitcoin, you pay 33,000 US dollars. This is the current price of one Bitcoin. And, you know, it's not just US dollars, it has also in different currencies. So this is it's possible to exchange your currency for one Bitcoin. So now let's see. Exactly. So, but to understand how the price is defined for one Bitcoin, we need to understand the factors or the drivers for one Bitcoin price to change. But basically, one important point is the supply demand. And supply demand means that if the supply, let's say, for example, with apples, you have 100 apples, and the demand, you have 100 people asking for the apples, so, and everyone gets one, so, and it's like in equilibrium, everyone gets one. If then the supply is less, let's say 50, but the demand is still high, 100, and you cannot have all of them, the price will go up. If the demand of if the demand is higher than the supply, it goes up in the price. And the other is for if the demand is low and the supply is high, the price goes down. It's just definition. But for Bitcoin, it's different because Bitcoin has it's a predefined supply, and we will see it in the next slides. So the supply is fixed, but demand, it means that more people want to have Bitcoin. So the more people want Bitcoin, the more the price should go up. But this is just one factor which drives the price of Bitcoin. Another important factor is the cost of production. So as I mentioned before, miners, these huge mining farms that use a lot of electricity, they consume a lot of electricity, and the electricity is pretty high. So if the cost of production is higher than the price, that the current price of Bitcoin, some miners will say it's not worth it for me, because I lose every time I produce Bitcoin or I validate a transaction within a block. It costs me more than I can receive selling one Bitcoin. So this is one factor also that can be considered for the pricing of Bitcoin. As well, regulation. So it means that government, they can say, no, we don't want that companies use Bitcoin. And if there is some restrictions, then the Bitcoin price can drop, as an example. One other point, very important, is the social media coverage, or in general, the media coverage. In the newspaper, the last years, you read a lot of about not good things about Bitcoin. And in the social media space, with TikTok and Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, there are a lot of people who have a lot of influence on the network. And when they write something, it can also drive Bitcoin up or down. One example is Elon Musk. It was 1 or 2 years ago, he tweeted about one coin in a cryptocurrency called Dogecoin. And once he said this tweet, it went up a lot. And this, you see, the social media effect the social media effect on the price is real. Then another another point is for Bitcoin, the price factor is competitors. As you know, there are maybe 19,000 cryptocurrencies at the moment. I mean, they say cryptocurrencies, but they are different from Bitcoin. However, some people could prefer to go to other cryptocurrencies and then say, okay, I don't want to use Bitcoin anymore. I want to use other cryptocurrencies for whatever reason. And the last, my view, unfortunately, one of the most drivers in the Bitcoin pricing is investment speculation. So what people do is they have no idea, why should I buy Bitcoin? People say, hey, you need to buy Bitcoin. They buy Bitcoin, and then the price goes down. Then you lose money. And the price, we will see it after in one chart. It can go up very high and low, very low, and you can lose money. So for investment, you need to be very, very careful when doing things like that. So this is very relevant. So yes, this is one other question that I have. I mean, we know there are 21 million Bitcoin. That's the fixed supply. How many Bitcoin have been mined until now? So this is one guess that I've put with you, and we will find it out together. So this is the link of blockchain.com. It's a very good homepage where you can find various information about Bitcoin, and I will show it to you now. Exactly. So this is the total circulating supply of Bitcoin. You can see here on the left side, you can see it. And then if you go to this blue line, you see how many circulating Bitcoin are around. And now we are somewhere in May.18 million 400,000 mined as of June 2020. This is now much more. We will see in the next slide how many Bitcoins are mined, and from there you can see how many are mined per year, per day. You can calculate it. So let's go back to the presentation. So, and actually I want to show you also this. There are different things that you can see on this homepage. For example, also this one, but we will not discuss it. It's the total hash rate. So it means the more time passes, the more the hash rate goes up, because it's more difficult to mine Bitcoin. And we will talk about this difficulty in the next slide. And because of that, the hash rate should go up, and the higher the hash rate is, the more secure the network is. And you see in the blue line how this has increased over time. And in the black line, this is the market price in US dollar. So when you see in 2010, it was below $1 US. Now 13 February 2011. In 2014, it went to 1,000. And the peak we had in 2021 was around 61,000 US dollar, and it came down now here. So, and this is just to see that there are so many information that are all public, and this is very interesting because of that you can see whether the network is secure or not. All right, I'm going to the next slide. Yes. So exactly. So there is this mining, what I mentioned before, in order to validate the transactions within one block. This is very relevant because without mining, there will be no Bitcoin network. On the other hand, there is this halving. And what halving means is, that I will go through these numbers, but halving in general means that the rewards for the miners to receive Bitcoin for each block they have, for each transactions that they have validated within a block, will decrease. So miners, they have two rewards that they receive. Once they receive the new mined Bitcoin per block, and secondly, they get also transaction fees from people sending Bitcoin from one place to the other. You need to pay transaction fees. So we know that on the left side, the limited supply of Bitcoin is 21 million. To understand how this works is that every block, so the transactions, the different transactions, various transactions are within one block, and every block is created every 10 minutes. And the reward for the miners are 6.25 Bitcoins. It means every block, every 10 minutes, 6.25 Bitcoin are produced. And this means for one day, a total of 900 Bitcoin will be produced. That's roughly, it can be a little bit more, a little bit less, depends on how fast is the block validated, but most of the time it's this 10 minutes. And counting all these figures together, then all halving will happen every 210,000 blocks. So 210,000 blocks, it's now, the last time was 2020. So the next one is in 2024. And in 2024, in the earlier year, once the halving has happened, the miners will get less Bitcoin. So for this, in this regard, it's important for miners that the price of Bitcoin goes up, because as of 2024, they will need more power to validate the transactions. These are the hash rates, more electricity, and this could mean more costs if the price of Bitcoin is not high enough, because you get less Bitcoin now. So it's all a calculation of the pricing factors that we discussed before for miners if they want to still mine Bitcoin. So, and the question now is, when will the last Bitcoin be mined? Knowing that there are now 900 Bitcoin mined per day, and knowing that this halving happens almost all 4 years, all these 210,000 blocks. So, and we know that 21 million is the fixed supply. So the last one will be in 2140. So in 2140, the last Bitcoin will be mined, if Bitcoin exists until now. Until then, of course, it can happen that other form of currencies will come and Bitcoin could disappear, or other forces that can bring Bitcoin down. But as of now, Bitcoin has not failed since the launch in 2009. So it's very secure. And as long as the miners and the network is validating transactions, Bitcoin will exist. Once they don't mine it anymore, or there is no interest, it's away. All right. I want to discuss the last, we have still 5 minutes, and I want to show you just some, some Bitcoin, exactly, hope you can see it, yes. So I want to show you the difference between Bitcoin, gold, and US dollar, and I don't want to go into all the details. But one important point for me, it's this once it's in the fifth, it's highly divisible. So what does it mean highly divisible? It means that you can divide it as much as you can, as you want. Gold, once you have gold, it is how it is. If you want to cut the half, then you need to have something to cut it, and it's not easy. For cash, you can pay in $1 in a note, and then you have coins. But the coins, they just 5 cents. It's the lowest, or 1 cent, for example, in some countries. But Bitcoin, it can go to 0.0000000000, and so on. So it can go much more behind, and this means that it's very divisible. If the Bitcoin price goes very high, we will talk about 0.0002 cent to each other to, for example, to buy water and so on, as an example. Another point, it's the scarcity, scarcity, and we know for gold that there is not indefinitely gold. There is as much gold as it is in the earth. We don't have more than it is in the earth. However, we need also to mine it. So there is still some gold in the earth, and we can mine it, but we know that there is a limited part. On the other hand, US dollars, for example, they can bring a lot of US dollars in the market. So, and every currency, every market, or every central bank in the world can issue more and more money to facilitate the economy and so on. However, this is not possible for crypto. Crypto is very, very scarce, as we know that there will be 21 million in general. There will be no more than 21 million. So the scarcity is very high, because we know that it's fixed. And one other point that is, for me, very important is the decentralization. So it's decentralized. It's not the same for gold and the US dollars. For crypto, as we saw, or for Bitcoin in general, we saw it is very global, organized, decentralized, without authority, without government that has authority over the coin, and so on. So these are some very important points. If you want to know more, I've put the source of this graph inside. There are other graphs also in regards to consumption of Bitcoin, gold, how much water do you need, and so on. But this is something that you could Google and check for yourself, which I think it's very important. All right, so we are coming now to almost the end of the session. The question that we had in the beginning, if the Bitcoin will be the future, the money of the future, that we don't know. We don't know yet. Of course, we know that the network is growing. We know how things are done, improvements, more companies are joining the network. However, we don't know how the future will be. It is something that it's worth it to see, to educate yourself, but we cannot predict the future. But it is important to stay up to date and to educate yourself. And one last point, don't believe all the things that you read, that Bitcoin will go to 1 million or whatsoever, because nobody knows. So do your own research, and this is very important. And stay educated and secure your wallet with your seed phrase. Yes. So this is the session that it's almost over for me. And I think, Reese, I think we are in time for the Q&A session.
Hi, Silvio. Thanks for an amazing session. We do have a question from Peter. It says, on what real economic values are Bitcoins based?
So the real economic values, wow, that's a very good question. Let's say for this, we know how much Bitcoin is in terms of energy consumption, how it uses, how much it uses to produce one block, how much energy is used. So we could say like this, okay, in order to have a more sustainable world, we want to have Bitcoin, which is decentralized. We want to have it with renewable energy. So we can define that the miners, they need to use renewable energy like solar panels or water that is not consumed in terms of coal or oil or gas or whatsoever. So, but we use the sun, the wind to produce the Bitcoin, then I would see a real economic value, because based on that, you as a society, as a world, you will think more globally in terms of, hey, do we need to get a better energy consumption as a society? So this could be one real economic value that I could see in the future, in terms of, you see the scarcity of Bitcoin and you see how much it consumes. So it could be like a benchmark for us to bring this consumption in terms of not renewable energy in this context, but to show with Bitcoin that we try to have a sustainable world. This is one thing that I have now in mind. I think Peter is with the energy consumption. So basically, you can see there are some internet pages that you can calculate the cost of one Bitcoin. So once you have this in mind, you see, does it make sense to mine Bitcoin or not? Does it make sense to go to another cryptocurrency, let's say Monero, or do I need to do other stuff, you know? Then the miner can decide itself in terms of consumption of the energy. But we as a global society, we know that Bitcoin is consuming, if I'm not wrong, almost like Denmark as a country in 1 year. It's just Bitcoin consuming. So, but the question is, yeah, how much does the US dollar consume? How much does the Swiss franc consume in terms of, we need also paper to produce the notes. We need to mine also metals in order to have coins. Every bank has its own computer, his own database. Everything needs to be on the internet and so on. This is also consumption a lot. And so we cannot compare the consumption just for itself. We need to put it every time compare it if it's possible. Sometimes it's not, but for Bitcoin, you see how much you spend for producing one Bitcoin or to validate one block. Are there any other questions or?
I think those are all the questions that we have here, Silvio.
All right. Perfect. And yes, for me, it was, if there are no other questions, it was for me a great pleasure to attend this session. I hope you enjoyed it. You could learn something in this short time, and I would highly encourage you to read or educate yourself about blockchain in general. Ethereum, it's one other, not only coin, but it's also a database or protocol that is very interesting to understand it. But we don't know how the future will be, but it is important to stay educated and yes, to talk about topics like this. Yes, and I hope you enjoyed it, and hope you will have more sessions. You will attend more sessions, and thank you very much for everything.